Good afternoon. Before we start, I would like to remind you that this presentation will be in Spanish. For the interpretation to English, choose the English channel. We're going to wait 1 minute and we will start. To the people that just joined, I'm reminding you that the conference will be presented in English. If you want the interpretation to English, please choose the English channel. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Marcela Geminiana. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Allergy Asthma Network. Welcome to the Unidos Hablemos virtual conference series, which addresses ongoing disparities and barriers to care for the Hispanic Latino community living with asthma, allergies, and related conditions. We have a few housekeeping items before we start today's program. The conference is in Spanish. If you would like the conference in English, choose the English channel. Thank you very much. We have a few announcements to make before we start. First of all the participants will have their microphones muted. This presentation will be recorded and published on our website in a few days. It'll last an hour and it includes the time for questions. The questions will be asked at the end, but you can include it in the Q&A section, which is at the bottom of your screen. We have someone monitoring the chat. If you have questions or need help, we will get to as many questions as we can before concluding. We will not be offering continuing education credits, but we do have a certificate of attendance if you need it for your records. This presentation is called Food Allergies in the Hispanic Latino Culture. First, we will have Dr. Vivian Hernandez Trujillo talking about food allergies, how they are diagnosed, how they're treated, and what are some barriers to care for the Hispanic Latino community. Then, Nisha Gibson will talk about her experience living with food allergies. We'll talk a little bit about clinical trials, the importance of diverse representation and research, and finally, we'll answer some questions from the audience. Special thanks to Genentech, who has provided funding support to make this conference possible today. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Vivian Hernandez Trujillo. Dr. Hernandez Trujillo is a clinical associate professor at Florida International University, Herbert Wertheim College of Medicine in Miami, Florida. She serves as the medical director for the Division of Allergy and Immunology at Nick Laus Children's Hospital. Dr. Hernandez is fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, Immunology, and American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. She's also a member of the Clinical Immunology Society. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Hernandez Trujillo, and I'll turn it over to you. I'm sorry, I do not hear Dr. Trujillo. I apologize. It's a pleasure being here with you today. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talking about a subject that is so important for everyone. As an allergist and a mom of two children that has food allergies and patient, this is a very important subject to me, and it's a pleasure to speak about this. We're going to start with the objectives today. We're going to talk about the definition of food allergy. We will talk about the severity of allergies, the presentation of patients that can vary, diagnosis, treatment, and the action plan for emergency. What is a food allergy? A food allergy is an immune response that happens after a person eats a certain food. Allergies occur after eating food more than once. It doesn't happen when you eat a food the first time. Sometimes you can get confused and say, oh, I never ate this. This never happened. But honestly, the food, the body had to be exposed at some point to produce this allergy. And most allergic reactions are slight, but some can be fatal and require emergency treatment. And that's why we always have to be prepared. What is the difference between food intolerance and a food allergy? This is something that nowadays we talk a lot about the food intolerances, but food allergy is different. Food intolerance happens in the digestive system. It can be that the intensity of the reaction are minor discomfort, mild to moderate. The symptoms are gastrointestinal. The reaction time might be delayed, and the action to take is to see a healthcare provider. A food allergy happens in the immune system. The intensity can vary, but it can be life-threatening. The symptoms can affect different organs, including the skin, respiratory, the heart, and gastrointestinal. Usually, the reaction is immediate. If it's not in a few minutes, it might be within 30 to 60 minutes, even if there are some cases that it takes a little longer. And the action to take, especially if it's a severe reaction, is to call 911. The severity of allergic reactions to foods can vary amongst the patients. For some patients, they may only have worsening eczema or atopic dermatitis or itching. For other patients, it can cause a very severe life-threatening reaction. It can also be life-threatening to some people. In a patient, it might be that one food causes mild symptoms, while other foods may cause in that same person anaphylaxis, which is the reaction, it's the most severe reaction to food. The severity of reactions can vary in a patient from one patient to the other. What are the common food allergens? In the United States, we talk about the 9 main food allergens. And the reason why this is important to define the 9 main food allergens is that this is required to put on the labels, on the food labels. So the 9 include dairy, eggs, soy, peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, fish, shellfish, and sesame. These are the 9 main food allergies. Any of these foods can cause a reaction, but these are the most common ones. And that's why we're going to talk about them a little bit today. Talking a little bit about how many people are affected, approximately 20 million Americans suffer of food allergies. 16 million adults, 4 million children, according to the data that we have from 2021 from the CDC of the United States. I, as a pediatrician and allergist, we might talk about a classroom in a school. 1 out of 13 children has some type of food allergy. So in the schools, for example, there are at least 2 children in every classroom that might have food allergies. And that is very common if the classroom has 26 children or more. Now, let's talk a little bit about the signs and the symptoms. And I'm telling you to look at the middle of this diagram, which talks about the common. It might be that in the mouth, there might be itching, swelling of the lips or the tongue. The throat might have itchiness. It might feel tight or a little bit hoarse, or you might have difficulty swallowing. In the heart, there might be a weak pulse. Obviously, if the person passes out, that might be a very serious sign and it's very severe. In the chest, it might be shortness of breath, Could be cough, could be wheezing, pain in the chest, in the skin, maybe itchiness, hives. The person might become red, or maybe there might be swelling. In the stomach, you might have vomiting, diarrhea, cramps. Sometimes there's nausea, sometimes abdominal pain. And then there's also a sense of danger or fear of impending doom, like something is happening. I've had patients say it has happened to me that I felt that something bad was happening. That is a sign of a very severe reaction and it has to be taken seriously. Here we might talk a little bit about the signs and the symptoms to food allergies in infants and younger children, toddlers. Symptoms like itchiness in a baby or a young baby, a young child. There might be tongue thrusting or pulling. You might see licking the lips, hands, objects, or maybe the throat will be itching. Sometimes they'll start scratching their ears, sometimes rubbing the eyes. You can see this in young children. Shortness of breath. It might be that they're breathing using their belly, which is not truly, it's not normal. Sometimes the younger babies might be breathing a little bit with the belly, but besides that, that is not normal. It might be that they're breathing very quickly. The nostrils might be opening wide, or perhaps chest, neck tugging because they feel something here. The breathing might be noisy. There might be a hoarse voice. This happened to my child when she was 18 months old. Sometimes they might start crying or they might have a barky cough. Or perhaps the breathing is noisy when they're inhaling. The worst cases are shock or fainting. You might see that they are flaccid. They might have a wobbly appearance. They might have difficulties waking up. They might be cranky more than normal. They might start crying and not have any type of consolation, inconsolable crying. And this is a very frightening sign. And maybe the child is very dependent upon the parents. And maybe this might be a 2-year-old that is always running around and is always independent and all of a sudden wants to be on top of the parents or an adult. So the problems, stomach problems that are the most important, especially in young children, the babies and young babies, stomach ache, diarrhea, hiccups that don't get better. They start to spit up. I've seen this many times. The back starts to arch or there might be vomiting. These might be signs of a food allergy. How is a food allergy diagnosed? I hope this helps you too. If you have a person in your family, if someone suffers of allergies, what are the type of questions that you will ask when you're visiting? And the history is the most important part. When I'm with a patient, I'm listening to exactly what happened, and their history is the most important thing. I might run any test, but the test is only to confirm what I'm suspecting. It's not possible to conduct tests, like I said to parents, to 100 different foods. But if you tell me that every time the child eats something that has dairy or doesn't feel well or starts turning red, that's very important to me. We'll ask, when did the reaction occur? How much time went by between this food was eaten until it happened? And where was this person? How did these symptoms happen? How much was eaten of the food and how the food was prepared? That's when I'm worried the most. If there were any type of condiments added, if it was a fresh fruit, was it a canned fruit, for example, canned foods? They are preserved with different things that perhaps I cannot run a test, but there are patients that have no tolerance to foods that are not fresh. Every time that they eat this food, if it's happened or if it happened once, and then let's suppose eggs. They ate eggs one day. I started to vomit, but I've eaten eggs 10 times after that and nothing happened. So then it's not the egg. It's not necessarily the egg that caused the reaction. Perhaps that particular egg was bad. Maybe it was expired or something. Also, the treatment that was used, what helped? Did you use a medication? Did you get better? And how long did you get better? We're going to ask that question. Also, to diagnose, we can run skin tests, which are done on the surface of the skin. Other tests that are blood tests, that these are called EEG specific. So if it does not help to confirm with the oral challenge, then it's necessary. One question that is always asked by the relatives and the parents when I speak to them: are food allergies hereditary? Well, for some patients, yes. For my daughters, yes. My father is allergic to shrimp, and of my 3 kids, two of us are allergic to shrimp, including myself, and I'm also allergic to peanuts, dry nuts, and my daughters are also allergic to peanuts and nuts, and I have a lot of nephews and nieces. They're also allergic. So for some patients, yes, the food allergies might come from the relatives. If one of the parents has allergies, then the risk of the children having these allergies are higher. And it's even higher if two parents have it. And it's not necessarily to a food, it might be any type of allergy. What are the principles to manage these food allergies? The most important part, and this I talk to my parents, it's to consider perhaps sending a child to a nutritionist with a deficient growth, or to children that have food allergies, or babies that have multiple food allergies. I usually consult with a dietitian because I think that it's very beneficial to everyone. They can give us ideas. I went for one of my daughters, I went to see a diet specialist. They give us ideas and they can see how the diet is doing, if something is missing, and they can give us alternatives, which is very important for us as parents of children that have allergies. Education is very important. And I thank you for being here today to learn a little bit and speak a little bit and share a little bit about how or what it's like to live with these food allergies. Also evaluating the risks if you have asthma, if using epinephrine for the severe reactions, if the prior reaction, which was potentially fatal, or teenagers or young adults. This might cause a little bit of worry because it increases the risk of having a more severe reaction. It's also very important to talk about an emergency plan and to have it written down. Also, when you go to the schools, normally, if you're going to have epinephrine at school, you have to have an action plan. And I think it's a very important part. And it has to be understood by the people in school, but also by the relatives. What happens if the child or a patient has an emergency or has some type of allergic reaction? And it's to be known what's going to be done within this plan and to be prepared in an emergency, including having the medication, the prescription, and access to epinephrine, an auto-injectable one, at all times. How can we live with allergies? I like this picture a lot because Hispanics love to get together with family, with friends, to eat and celebrate. It's something very important to our culture. Our parties consist of food and sharing with family. It's important for everyone to understand if a family member has a food allergy or if a friend has an allergy. We must offer alternative foods that are safe for that member of the family, not only feels that he or she is part of the celebration, but also so they have no risks. I always tell my patients whenever we have holidays, and if I'm on my shift, I'm always worried about Halloween, Thanksgiving. We all get together and everybody brings something, and they bring different types of foods. Some have dairy, some have milk. So this is a problem for people that are allergic to dairy. Some people might have nuts in the sweets or dried fruits. So if a person doesn't know, the person might have a reaction. And of course, for Christmas and other celebrations, these are the ones that worry us the most. So it's important to know if the relatives or the patients, if we have to offer alternatives so that they are part of the celebration. I think that this is very important, being the mom of two children. So we're going to talk about the treatment. The most important thing, like I said, is to avoid eating these allergens. It's avoiding it completely. The exceptions might be in the food allergy syndrome, where the person might eat a fruit or vegetable and they might have a reaction. For example, eating pineapple, if I eat it fresh, I feel itchiness, or the tongue, it feels like it's itchy or it's tingling. That's one type of allergy. But if it's cooked, if that food is cooked, normally it doesn't cause the same symptoms. People that tolerate baked goods, if the person is allergic to dairy, and in some patients, it might be that they can't have a glass of milk, or they can't have yogurt, or they can't have cheese, but they can eat something that is baked. Then you must talk to your doctor about it, because in some patients it is tolerated. But besides these cases, you must avoid these foods completely. There's a law that requires that these 9 main allergens are clearly placed in the tags of all the foods that are manufactured in the United States. Sesame, this was added in 2021. One thing that I want to say, especially if you live in a place that, they bring foods from all over the world, in big cities, remember that tags from other countries, they do not have this requirement. So it's very important that you take this into account. Different labels don't mention the different risks, so it's not too clear how the companies have to write it. But it might be that some labels might contain, maybe another label will say processed in a plant where they're manufacturing something else, or manufactured using equipment that was shared. So it's important to see that, because it might be something placed voluntarily. As soon as they put the label, that's where basically they have to tell you. But they can put these other words, these other warnings, and I tell patients, if it says it contains this food, obviously you must not eat it. But you should eat to your doctor or your allergist to see where you fall in this risk and how you can avoid, depending on the label. And obviously, contamination, cross-contamination. If you go to a buffet, if you go to an ice cream store, or anywhere they have yogurt, if it's frozen and they have different foods that can be added, obviously, if there might be a person using the same spoon in 3 different things, or perhaps in equipment that is being shared with other things. So that's why you must know that cross-contamination can cause problems. Regarding treatment, epinephrine is the gold standard treatment and the only one that saves lives. This is very important. You have to understand this. You have to carry it at all times. Keep 2 doses available at all times. It's important to protect from extreme temperatures now that it's summertime and it's very hot, but also during the winter when it's really cold in certain parts of the United States. And no other medication will save lives in a potentially life-threatening, and severe reaction. So do not rely on antihistamines or steroids or albuterol. It's very important. If it's a very severe reaction, it's epinephrine, and that's what saves lives. Being exposed to food allergens can occur at any time, anywhere. I've worked with residents for many years, and one of the residents did not have the epinephrine. She said, I have it at home. I have epinephrine at the hospital. And unfortunately, they had a reaction on the way to the hospital, and 911 had to be called. It's something unexpected. It can happen at any time. And me, as a mother, if you look inside my pocketbook, I always have epinephrine for my daughters and for myself. It's important to always be prepared anywhere at any time. So we say give epinephrine first and fast. This is an example of where management of epinephrine, if it's used immediately and early on, it helps and it saves lives. We don't want to wait too long. The injectable one, obviously, is applied to the side of the thigh. And depending of the brand of this auto injector, it depends on that specific brand, maybe 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 3 seconds. But that must be clarified and it must be known. You must have both epinephrine auto injectors available at all times and not depending and not trusting antihistamines or albuterol or oral steroids because they will not save a life. There is no cure for a food allergy, but now that I've been practicing in food allergies for more than 20 years, we have more hope now. There are different treatments that even though they don't cure, it's a light at the end of the tunnel. Immunotherapy to deal with severe allergens. It has increased under the care of the allergist, and you go home with the treatment. Also recently, omalizumab, that's a biological injectable. This is for patients that have food allergies, and this is as of 12 months of age. And also you can speak with your doctor if this is a treatment that you might consider. For patients with other food allergies, eosinophilic esophagitis, and food allergy, there's dupilumab or oral budesonide. So we have different treatments, and it's possible that in the future, these might be available to be able to administer epinephrine. So there's a lot of hope for all of our patients. Living with food allergies emotionally, it's very important. And I would like to talk a little bit about this. Diminishing the quality of life and increasing the stress and the anxiety is very common in patients and relatives that have these food allergies. 25% of people might experience harassment regarding their food allergies. One of my daughters, unfortunately, had a girl that she knew she was allergic to peanuts and she was eating peanuts, and she approached her and she threw a peanut at her. Obviously, it scared my daughter a lot. Nothing happened to her. And she started having hives. She became very nervous, but she did not eat the food. And this is an example where children might be victims of bullying or harassment regarding allergies. There's a support group that might be beneficial, and I tell patients this is something that might help us, and it might be necessary to refer them to a mental health professional. There are many patients that I recommend it. I do it mostly for anxiety that is caused by living with allergies to food. Everybody is different. Some people need it, some people don't need it, but it might help a lot of people. And then when do we refer the person to a professional mental health? Me being a friend of a patient, if there is worry regarding the environment or food allergy, it's very important and difficulties to be able to deal with the situation if you're always thinking about this allergy. Sometimes when you're preparing, when we're going to have an oral challenge or introduce it at the clinic, it might be something that can be considered, and also to establish independence. When children are going to college, when they're leaving the house, it's good to speak to someone so that they can talk about the anxieties that they're suffering. If they have questions, I think it's very important. And also, when you're worried about living with this food allergy, I think it's very important always taking this into account, not only what happens physically, but socially and emotionally, how you can deal with these conditions. It's important, as I said and spoke a little bit before, use caution when reading the food labels. Always look for the label. If it says contains, do not purchase it if your allergen is listed on this statement. If there is no contains statement, then you have to read the entire list. Talk to your allergist to find out if you need to avoid foods with warning statements. As I already spoke about, if it might contain or if it's produced in an establishment or with shared equipment, it's something that you should talk to your doctor about because every person is different. Read food labels every time you make a purchase, because I can say that even though you've been buying a product for 10 years, it's possible that the label will change. Unfortunately, when the allergies changed and they started including the sesame, some products started including sesame is added to the label and people did not know. So it's important that every time you buy, you must read the label, take your moments of reading the label, because food manufacturers might change ingredients frequently and they might not let you know. So if in doubt, do not eat the food. As a mother, when I go to the supermarket, please be careful because some products, they seem to be very similar, and it's just one ingredient, but it might be that ingredient, for example, a cookie, if it has nothing in the other cookie, it looks exactly like the same one and the product looks exactly the same, but they added peanuts. This has happened. So it's important to make sure that you're reading all these labels from close up. Also, the reality is about the hidden ingredients. Sometimes they don't use words that we think that they are what they are. For example, I'll tell you some words that mean something else. If it says casein or curds or ghee or lactalbumin, and the other one is sometimes they write natural flavor, and that might mean that it contains some type of dairy. It's important to recognize it. Egg might say albumin, lysozyme, or meringue, or ovalbumin, or surimi. That might also contain eggs. Peanut, it might say cold pressed peanut oil. It might say legumes, might say marzipan or nougat for sesame. Sometimes I'll write a word like bene, quinquili, sesamo, simsim, tahini. And remember that this is very concentrated sesame. For soy, they might write miso or shoyu, natto, tamari, tempe. For wheat, it might say farro, it might say malt, it might say semolina, spelt. That might mean that it contains wheat. These are more practical things. The information regarding when you're going to eat outside of the home. If you're going to eat at a friend or family member's, notify them beforehand that they have food allergies. As early as possible, do it at a restaurant. Let the server know, the chef or the manager. In some places, they might send the manager. Some places, they may send the chef over. Do not be shy about asking the staff. And I talk to my daughters all the time about this. Never be ashamed or shy to say, I have this allergy. Normally, when I go to a restaurant, the first thing I do, I greet everyone. I greet the server and I let them know at the table. I just want you to know we have food allergies. These are the ones. And I tell them. That's one way of doing it. If you feel that they're not taking you seriously, do not take the risk of eating there. If you think this person is not really listening to me, this person is not taking me seriously, then I prefer not to eat there because my safety is more important. And it's never early for a child or adolescent to notify others about their allergies. And this is something we do normally at my home. It's very important because if you have a child with you, you know that this child will be able to say, I have allergies, and that child can protect himself or herself. There are also cards. There might be cards printed for the cook. This is a list of my food allergies. I like this very much. Food allergy alert. And it says, you can write it down here when you're going to travel. I suggest that you bring it with you and bring it in the language of the country you're traveling to, so that way you can give it to them at the restaurant. And then regarding cross-contamination, it's important to wash your hands with soap and water before you cook a food, but commercial wipes help, not the disinfecting ones. Protecting the food allergies in a safe place, you have to put them away separately from other foods. Clean the surfaces, the utensils, the equipment, all with hot water and soap after preparing the food. And also use the rule of never sharing, never share the food with utensils or drinks. Consider the possibility of using plates or sponges that are exclusive to the allergies, depending on how severe. Avoiding buffets also, because that's very important. The other reality of living with food allergies is that there is a lack of general information for our patients, for Spanish-speaking patients. There's a lack of material in their languages and their level of understanding. It's important to have the right education to keep the patient safe, and education empowers patients and families as well. That's why, once again, I thank you for joining us today. Let's talk for one moment about food insecurity. There was a study of low-income Puerto Rican population in Hartford, Connecticut, that found that more than 20% of Latino families, 22% were more likely to have food insecurity than non-Latino whites. Also, something good is that patients that attend cultural events or at the church, this is an indicator of a stronger social network and food security. Spanish-speaking only households, that was a risk factor for food insecurity, unfortunately. Also, when we talk about food insecurity and mental health in Hispanics, there was a survey done of pregnant women. This was also in Hartford, Connecticut. More than 66% participated in WIC, which is the WIC program, Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children. 1/3 were uninsured, half were bilingual, and 1/3, unfortunately, had food insecurity prior to the survey. Elevated symptoms of depression when household experience food insecurity. And it's important to share information regarding WIC, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Program, and giving them material in their preferred language. I like this because there are food allergies all over the United States. It doesn't matter the state that you live in. It doesn't matter if you live close to a city, a big city. You can see all of these green ones. There are certain food allergies, and you cannot find the foods that are needed. And there are certain organizations that help with food allergies. Securing Safe Food is a nonprofit organization that provides food for people with allergies to food pantries across the United States. Allergy Strong offers education and advocacy to better help low-income food allergy patients and their caregivers. And Food Diversity connects patients and families with food allergies with food resources. These are some examples of the organizations. There are many resources. Allergy Asthma Network.org is very important. I refer a lot of my patients to go there, and my message is important. Avoiding foods that contain your food allergens, reading food labels before you eat these foods, and being prepared in case of an allergic reaction. Carry epinephrine. Acknowledging Allergy and Asthma Network website, AAAI Food Allergy Teaching Slides, and thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Hernandez Trujillo. This was very informative. So I would like to introduce now Nashea Trizo. She's a Spanish professor, and she's an educational professor for 16 years. She has shellfish and dry fruit allergies, and she's also allergic to peanuts. She is an advocate of equality and inclusion for Hispanic families in economical development. Thank you, Naishe, for being with us today. And I am going to now give the floor to you. Thank you, Marcela. Hello to everyone. My name is Naishe. I was raised in Puerto Rico. Now I live in Virginia. I was diagnosed with allergies at the age of 8 years old. It presented as a rash on my skin that my mother did not understand where it was coming from. I was always scratching. I always had something on my skin. I felt like I had a lot of mosquito bites on my skin. And then when she brought me to the doctor, that's when they started conducting all these allergy tests. And it turned out that I was positive in everything, absolutely everything. Every tree, every animal, dogs, cats. I couldn't eat bread. I couldn't drink milk, no meat, no red meat, no chicken, nothing. So when we went home, my mother took everything out of the kitchen. I said, okay, let's start by doing this. Let's start with zero. So we start with rice and beans. That was the only thing I could eat for about 6 months. And then after 6 months, my mom said, okay, that's good enough. We need to find another way of dealing with this. So she started buying things that she was buying before. She would cook the same things. And then that's when I had the allergies, and that's when she gave me Benadryl. So every time I ate something that didn't sit well with me or would cause symptoms, she would give me Benadryl, and she would say, okay, now go to sleep because this is all we can do for you right now. So as I grew up, my allergies never went away. I know there are people that can improve and some allergies disappear and some start. For me, it's always been the same thing. And I was one of those people that thought that maybe you have an allergy, you take Benadryl, you go to bed, you wake up, and everything is fine. But that's not the way it is. When I was 18 years old, I had lobster. One of my work supervisors had a party and she offered me the lobster, and I ended up in the emergency room. I had to stay there for about a week because of the reaction that I had to lobster. I said, okay, I'm going to start over again. I'm going to find another doctor. At the time, I was already in Virginia. We had moved here. And I decided to contact another doctor and run a test so that I could have my own information regarding what my allergies were and what I should do, what I shouldn't do. So it turned out that I came out with a very long, long list. And then 10 years later, I met my husband, and then I had my daughter. Then during this whole time, I was never told that it was possible that my children might have these allergies. I thought that it was something that would only affect me. So I had my daughter, and then 2 years later, she was with my mom in the car. And then my daughter, when she was young, she was always singing. We always had to have music in the car for her to sing. According to my mother, they were going to where we were going, and then she stopped singing. She gave her a piece of cookie and she stopped singing. So she thought she was sleeping. 10 minutes went by. And then when she looked back, my daughter was not sleeping. Her eyes were very swollen. The face was turning black and blue. And she had marks all over her body. So my mother brought her to the emergency room and she called work and she said, listen, your daughter is in the hospital. You have to come here right now. When I got to the hospital, there were two police officers. There was a nurse, there was an attorney, children's attorney, and they sat down with me in the room saying that they wanted to know if I hit my daughter, what happened, what was wrong with my daughter, and I got scared and I said I was working, I don't know. So a short period of time later, the doctor comes. They called a pediatrician that was at another hospital, and he came, and he did have a lot of knowledge regarding allergies in kids. He saw my daughter. He said, you have to give her an injection right now. And they injected my daughter that I know nowadays. I know it was epinephrine, but back in those days, they gave her an injection. And then within 2 hours, the swelling went down. And the doctor spoke to all of us, to the police officers, security, everybody that was in the room. And the doctor said, listen, what happened to the child? She had an allergy. We have to run a lot of tests to see exactly what foods she ate and to see what caused these problems. So my mother had to provide all the foods she gave to the child that was in the pocketbook. And as of that point, we started testing my daughter. After that, I had my son, who also has a lot of allergies. And then I have another child who has a lot of allergies. So this is a household full of allergies wherever you look. So whenever I cook dinner, I have to sometimes cook 3 different dinners so that everybody can eat. If we want to have a family gathering, I always cook. I cook for everyone. That way I am in control of what my kids are eating and also myself. We have to shop in different places because I have to be very careful with the ingredients that are in the foods. But I can tell you that I know that for a person that is just starting on this path with allergies, the first thing you will feel is that you'll feel alone. You'll feel that nobody is there to support you. Nobody knows what you're suffering, but it's something very big. I now am on Facebook and I started seeking people that, can relate to what I'm going through. And this group has helped me a lot because they always give me food alternatives that I can prepare. I'm very allergic to a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we always eat as Hispanics. Avocado is one, I cannot eat it. So they gave me alternatives and I share it with my family. We also went to a place that we learned how to change, how to spend family time. And we don't only focus on the foods. We don't focus only on the foods. If we're going to have a plate that has meat, it's not about eating the meat and that's it. We really focus on the games that we can play with our family members, what we're talking about, what we're going to do with the children. Are we going to run outside, play outside, instead of only focusing of what's on our table? I think it's a healthier lifestyle for us. It eliminates a lot of the stress factors. I changed careers. I was going to be an attorney, but then with what happened to my child, I decided to become a teacher. So that way I can be in control of the environment for my children. And I did it. Now my youngest son is going to middle school. He's going to high school to ninth grade. And I'm also going with him so that I can be in control because it eliminates a lot of stress. It's a different world and you have to learn how to manage, but it can be done. And I have a lot of trust in my doctors, my community, my allergists, everybody that provides support. I have a niece who also has the same allergies that I have, and I understand her. And I think we have a very special relationship because I understand her. She's allergic to a lot of things, just like me. So I think that you can have other relationships with people when, as long as you're sharing and trying to learn things, new things from each other. Thank you so much for your story. We're very grateful for you sharing this experience since you were a child in your family. Thank you so much. We're going to invite Dr. Hernandez Trujillo once again about clinical trials and why it's important that people of different backgrounds participate. Dr. Trujillo, I give you the floor now. Thank you, Naishe, for sharing because you spoke about very important things. I definitely agree with you that when you are diagnosed, you feel very alone, but we are not alone because we are an incredible community. And the Allergy and Asthma Network is very important. We're a community that, we can just be a community, understand and share. And this is an example. I would like to talk a little bit about the importance of clinical trials, especially for Latino people, because clinical trials are research studies in which people volunteer. And this will help to find answers to specific health questions. And these clinical trials provide an opportunity to explore alternative treatments beyond the standard options and can also be considered a treatment option. They aim to improve existing treatments or discover new treatments and potential benefits to participating in a clinical trial and access to new treatments, contribution to medical knowledge, close monitoring and care, potential cost savings, empowerment, and advocacy. It gives us information that we did not have before. Remember that participating in a clinical trial also involves risks such as potential side effects or uncertainty about if the treatment will work. It's essential to discuss these factors with your healthcare provider and carefully weigh the pros and cons before deciding to participate. Why is diversity important in clinical trials? People may experience the same disease differently. It's important to include a variety of lived experiences, living conditions, and characteristics as Latinos, our community, to benefit from all the scientific advances and so that all diverse participants can help understand safety and how medication works in every population because it doesn't happen the same way. It also helps the investigators understand the different patterns according to health and different origins. For example, the Latino community makes up 18% of the US population, but less than 8% of clinical trial participants identify as Hispanic. That's why it's important. Now we will talk about any questions that you have, and thank you so much for your attention. We've received some questions from the participants for Dr. Hernandez Trujillo. Can allergies be cured? Can they be healed? No, you cannot heal them. You can't cure them nowadays as an investigator and allergist. Honestly, we're learning more and more each day. The reality, Shay spoke about something important in some foods, in some patients. Yes, they might improve during their lives. For example, young children that start with allergies to eggs or dairy, it might be that as time passes, the allergy might disappear. That's possible. With other foods, it's not that common. For example, peanuts, dry fruits. Normally, those do not improve. They do not, there is no cure, but at least the treatment right now, unfortunately, there is no treatment for that. Another question. If a person with asthma isn't sure about having difficulties breathing because of an allergy, because of asthma, is it okay to use epinephrine and is it okay to use albuterol? Good question. Normally, I tell patients when you have a reaction, let's suppose that you're eating something and you can't breathe. Sometimes it's difficult to think when you don't feel well, but you have to think, what am I eating? Is there a possibility that this contains something that causes allergy or maybe cross contamination? And what do I feel? If it's only one symptom, then that's different. Truthfully, when we talk about when to use epinephrine, really it's two different systems after eating a food, or that definitely will include that allergen. So it's not only the lack of being able to breathe, but it's also itchiness, it's hives, and this is an indication to use epinephrine and going to the emergency room. This might change in the future, but right now it's epinephrine and calling 911 or going to the closest emergency room. It's very difficult for me, and I think it would be good for you to speak to your doctor about, because without knowing exactly what's going on, if you think it's asthma, and you want to use albuterol, then it's okay. But the problem is that if it's more than asthma, let's suppose it's a very severe reaction, then albuterol on its own basically is not going to be enough. And as I said before, epinephrine is what saves lives, not albuterol. Albuterol is good for asthma, but for anaphylaxis or a severe allergic reaction to a food, it won't be enough. So I suggest you speak to your doctor and to define it a little bit more, but definitely two symptoms in the body at the same time, in different parts of the body at the same time after eating food that contains or might contain an allergen is an indication for epinephrine and not albuterol. One more question. At what age can a child have an allergy test if you believe the child has a food allergy? It can be done at any age. I'm so happy this question was asked many years ago. It wasn't common to conduct these tests on young children, but now everything has changed regarding the recommendations for foods, and it's starting early. And you can speak with your general doctor. Let's say nowadays a 2-month-old baby has a reaction and you think it's a dairy, then they can conduct a test on that baby. That's not a problem. And one last question, because we're close to 5:30. Can you explain what happens when the mouth gets itchy or the lips get swollen after eating fruit like apple or pineapple? Yes. We call that, it's an oral allergy syndrome. Basically, it's a local reaction and it's not systemic. It's not in every system of the body. That's why, yes, it is uncomfortable, but rarely it will cause a major allergy. But normally it just stays in the mouth and it improves as time goes by, as you rinse out your mouth. And that's important. If something else happens, like for example, lack of air or vomiting or diarrhea, then that is caused by using the epinephrine. Thank you so much, Dr. Hernandez Trujillo. Thank you for Nashe Gibson for being with us today. All of the participants, you will receive an email in a few days with a link to the recording and additional resources regarding food allergens and an evaluation regarding this presentation. And thank you again from all of us at Allergy and Asthma Network. Join us the next time.